True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
I told you when I came in here that I'm going to treat you with respect, and I've asked you to do the same for me. We talked about the whole idea of how we've approached you here, okay? The trying to be as discreet as possible, okay? But the problem is, Russell, is every time I walk out of this room, there's another issue that comes up, okay? And it's not issues that point away from you, it's issues that point at you, okay? And I want you to see what I mean, all right? This is the footwear impression of the person who approached the rear of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. Yeah. Okay? Alright? Essentially, when you're dealing with footwear impressions, we have a gentleman on the OPP who's basically world-renowned. His name is John Norman. And essentially, with footwear impressions, you're in a situation where you're pretty much in the area of fingerprints, okay? And essentially, what we're talking about here is, especially when you start adding in other pieces of information that support an investigative position, okay? This is a photocopy of the boot that you took off your foot just a little while ago, okay? Now, I'm not an expert in footwear impressions, so I rely on the experts. Footwear impressions are very much like fingerprint comparisons, okay? You take a look at this print, and again, this is one print. This person walked through, there's several different prints to compare, so we're going to get features off of one print to compare, features off of another print to compare. Yeah. These are identical. Okay? Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. Okay, you want discretion. We need to have some honesty, okay? Because this is getting out of control really fast, Russell. Okay, really, really fast. This is getting beyond my control. Alright, I came in here a few hours ago, and I called you the way I called you today because I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. But you and I both know you were at Jessica Lloyd's house, and I need to know why.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick. Good evening. Today's episode is brought to you by Spice Islands. Spice Islands has a craft approach when it comes to spices, and you can taste the difference in every bottle. To me, that's sort of like comparing craft beer versus macros. Not naming any names here, Budweiser. Spice Islands still sun-dry many of their spices, and they maintain a strict standard for each item to ensure consistency, quality, and flavor. I'm a fan of their curries because I love IPAs, and they pair well with spicy curry dishes. And Spice Island has 3 curries. So visit spiceislands.com/brewery for more spice facts and delicious recipes, and pick up Spice Island spices in the premium spice section of your local retailer.
How well do we know the people in our daily lives? Our co-workers, our boss, the clerk at the grocery store, our neighbors, our friends, or even our spouse. Many people thought they knew Colonel David Russell Williams. He was a decorated Air Force pilot and commander at the Canadian Forces Base at Trenton, Ontario, and a respected member of his community when he was arrested in 2010 and charged with the murders of 2 women and numerous other sexually related crimes. The realization that he was a sexual predator and a murderer shocked the military and the country, and it quickly became an international story. What were the signs that this was a truly deviant individual? I mean, there had to be some. There had to be moments in his professional or his personal life where the cracks showed through. Many people quite reasonably believe that his wife must have known.
I'm one of those.
Yes. Now join us at the quiet end today as we go back to the childhood of Russell Williams, through his college years, and the escalation of his abhorrent behavior from stealing panties to sexual assault and to murder. Also, his victims cannot be ignored. These crimes left many people traumatized and also took 2 young women from the people who loved them, snuffing out their bright and boundless futures. We will remember these victims and examine the secret life of a predator, in this episode of True Crime Brewery, An Officer and a Psychopath. So it's time to get those Canadian beers opened up. We've spent a lot of time with Canada lately, so what did you pick for our beer today?
I'm going back kind of to my Canadian roots. One of the first beers we did from Canada was from Beau's All Natural Brewing Company. In fact,
Absolutely, I remember.
the winner of our first and most famous
And only.
and only, okay, you had to say that,
Yeah.
beer review did a beer from Beau's. So this one is called Farm to Table. It's a dry Irish stout. Now, a dry Irish stout, many of us will think of Guinness or something like that. It's on the lighter side. It's more drinkable. They tend to be creamy. Many are poured in a nitro system where the tap gives you a thicker, creamier head. Bitterness is there, mostly from the roasted barley and hops, but it's not a terribly bitter beer. So this particular one, the Farm Table Dry Irish Stout, is black with a thick tan head and a ton of lace. Pretty looking beer. Has a coffee and roasted malt aroma, pretty roasty coffee taste, and a creamy mouthfeel.
Sounds really yummy.
It is. And for those of you who think, I can't drink a dark beer because it tastes too harsh or it's too heavy or something,
Heavy is usually my complaint.
this is a good one to try.
It's not too heavy?
No, you would love it.
Okay. Well, let's open it up because I am anxious to try this one.
Okay.
Okay, Dickie, it does look like a delicious beer. We've got it poured into the snifters, and I think we should head on down to the quiet end of the bar.
Yeah,
What do you
and
think?
the quiet end is quiet tonight, so we'll just
Perfect.
hang out and do our podcast.
Well, that's what we want. We want the quiet end to be quiet.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get started.
Now, whether Russell Williams was born evil or a product of his environment, or a combination of both, can definitely be debated. He did live a privileged life, though. He was born in England in 1963 to Christine and Cedric David Williams, just 11 months after their wedding. Both of his parents were from wealthy families. After Cedric obtained his Ph.D., he got a job as a research metallurgist at a nuclear research facility in an isolated area of Ontario, Canada. In the early 1960s, Atomic Energy of Canada needed skilled workers. To lure in the best and the brightest candidates, they offered enticing compensation packages, especially for the PhDs. Russell was only 7 months old when they made the move. They lived in a 3-bedroom duplex which was provided by the company. The town, Deep River, was a government-mandated settlement designed to be an idyllic community shared exclusively by people working for the nuclear plant. The lawns were well manicured, the streets were clean and edged with flowers. It was a sanitized version of small-town life.
Sounds like Stepford Wives,
Absolutely.
doesn't it?
Yeah, there's no crime, no unemployment, no homelessness, no poverty. Everyone was on this predetermined salary scale. Traffic was scarce because most workers were chauffeured to work back and forth in refurbished Air Force buses. But the Williams family, they fit right in. The town was full of affluent Anglo-Saxon expatriates who held PhDs. The government had also provided many recreational activities for them. The town had a yacht club, golf course, tennis courts, bowling alley, swimming pools, playgrounds, skating rink. I mean, you want it, you name it, they had it.
Yeah, and this is in a settlement of 5,000 people.
Yes.
Big time.
So culture was provided as well. There was a theater, a cinema, and some various social clubs. Organized social dances on the weekends went until 2 or 3 a.m.
Despite all that Deep River had to offer, Some described it as a pretentious, oppressive, and competitive community.
I could see that potential.
Yeah, the residents were young, smart, and upwardly mobile. Some were snobbish, with attitudes of superiority.
I could definitely see that.
Cedric and Christine became involved with the yacht club and tennis club. Christine could leave Russell and his little brother Harvey in the playground near the tennis courts as she played tennis. Now the Williamses became friendly with another couple, Jerry and Lynn Sovka. Two couples epitomized the high-energy, high-performance people who made Deep River unique. A population of 5,000 supported more than 60 clubs and teams. I'm just flabbergasted by that.
Are you? Well,
Yeah.
it was a wealthy company.
It was, and they were pouring the money in. And anyway, the residents boasted that theirs was the only small-town stop on the National Ballet circuit.
That's pretty impressive.
Wow, it is.
Now, at times, social conventions were relaxed in this community. On the dance floor at the Deep River Yacht and Tennis Club, for example, the moves could get quite racy. The Brits brought a freer kind of culture. One former scientist said, if you went to a dance, you didn't just dance with your wife, you danced with 3 or 4 other partners.
Now I'm thinking the Brits are kind of staid and Puritan anyway.
No, that's a facade.
Okay,
Because
apparently not.
Because things could go further. The sexual tension wasn't limited to the dance floor by any means. Beneath the conservative veneer, there was a very active swinging scene in Deep River. Couples would party together at the local hotel, where men would swap their wives, first as dance partners, and then they had the potential to swap them as sexual partners as well.
Well, hush my mouth.
So the son of the Williamses' next-door neighbor often babysat Russell and Harvey on the weekends while the parents were out having fun, and his mother would fondly remember Russell as a bright and intelligent little boy. A woman named Ann Anderson also babysat the boys. She remembers them as well-adjusted, playful kids, and she doesn't remember them having any behavioral issues, but their parents seemed fairly strict in the community.
They did. However, while many marriages blossomed in Deep River, others fell apart. On October 31st, Halloween, 1969, Christine Williams filed for divorce. Now this was several years before the age of no fault, so the Ontario judges demanded a reason for dissolving a union. Mrs. Williams cited adultery, and court records show her husband was having an affair with Lynn Sovka, their good friend.
Yeah, the other couple's
The
wife.
other couple.
Right.
And within months, Christine Williams sold her husband Cedric her share of the house, and she moved to Scarborough, which was at that time a Toronto suburb.
Yeah, but she didn't leave alone. Not only did she have custody of the boys, but on June 2nd, 1970, a little more than 4 months after her divorce was final, she married Jerry Savka. So after sharing a sailboat and partying together, the men had ended up with each other's wives.
We know that she ended up with him. But
Yes.
the fact that her ex-husband and his ex-wife got together, we don't know about till later.
Well, it seemed pretty close together to me. It wasn't a lot of time.
No, that's true.
So these guys were going to the club together, they were sailing partners, and they'd gone to these parties, and we can only think that they probably swapped their wives. If not for sex, at least for dancing and socializing. And then they ended up kind of switching partners in a more permanent sense.
Well, you have to think there was sex involved also.
Well, I'm saying probably, yes.
Probably.
We have no evidence of that.
No. Okay.
So this news, as you can imagine, was big news in this small community, though. It swept the town like wildfire, another ex-sailor would recall.
Yeah, I guess it would. I mean, it's one thing to dance with other people and maybe even have sex with other people, but to swap wives, that's a big-time scandal.
Well, it is. And this is something when you do the nightly swapping, you have some drinks, you do the swapping, that's all under the carpet. And I would say, especially in that day, doing that is different. But when you come out into your real life and get a divorce, which wasn't that common then, and actually end up marrying the spouse of your neighbor, that's a huge scandal.
It is.
Absolutely. It must have been tough on the kids.
It reminds me of the baseball players many, many years ago that swapped wives. I think they played for the Yankees.
How did you know about that?
Well, I was a sports nut.
Oh, and this made the news?
Of course.
Oh, I never heard of
It
this.
was big-time news.
Okay.
I forget their names, but they swapped wives.
Just a couple of them or a whole group?
No, just two
Oh,
couples.
They married each other's wives?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's scandalous. Come on.
It is.
Because then you have to think there was adultery.
Duh.
Right. Well, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but here I would think there was adultery. Now, Christine, she complained that there was an indication from the first year of their marriage that she and Cedric were sexually incompatible. Now, she didn't give any details, so we don't know, but was Russell exposed to any sexual activity or any kind of strange behavior in his home? I've wondered about that. I mean, could that have contributed to who he became in his adult life? Was there some sexual confusion, something like that going on in the household?
Well, certainly you're always looking for reasons why somebody ends up as they end up, and that would be something that you'd look at, although I'm not sure it played any huge role.
Okay. Well, I think it's something to think about for sure.
Oh, sure. Now, as a child, Russell was shy and awkward. He was a nerd. He excelled at playing piano and trumpet. He started high school in 1978 at Birchmont Park Collegiate Institute, which was the most academic of the 3 public school options in Toronto.
And you had to be accepted. It wasn't just a choice.
Right.
So he had to be at a certain level of academic excellence to get in.
For sure.
Right.
And it wasn't because he was a jock or anything. It was because of his musicianship and academic performance. So Russell had an attention to detail and a devotion to music, which helped him to be successful in the music program. But he wasn't popular in high school. Of course not. The high school kids that are popular are the jocks and the outgoing people.
Yeah, but I think there's more to it with Russell. But we'll find out as we go on.
That may be.
Yeah.
But he didn't fit the stereotype of the popular high school kid.
No.
Sarah, a girl who lived across the street from him and played the flute in the same band, Sarah was the only girl that he dated during that time. Russell and Sarah seemed to have a lot in common, and Russell didn't seem to notice any of the girls. Now, they broke up eventually, and we don't know what the reasons for the breakup are. Sarah has refused to speak publicly about this, and reporters on the case have made note that most of those who knew Russell in his younger years have refused to speak publicly.
And this is interesting, more so than usual in this type of situation. Maybe there aren't situations like this, really.
Well, maybe not, but you look at people that have done heinous crimes, and you talk to their old acquaintances, and they're always ready to talk about people.
Seems like they're anxious to talk about it.
But Russell, when he was finally arrested and brought to justice, pretty much nobody wanted to talk about him.
Well, and many would also become defensive when they were approached about him. Right? There were several.
Well, yeah. So one old friend of Russell's confided they thought the media were hanging him out to dry, even though Russell confessed all the charges against him.
Yeah, that flabbergasts me.
Doesn't it?
I mean, we know he's done it, he's confessed, and someone's being defensive of how the media is treating him?
Well,
I'm sorry,
I mean,
but
basically,
come on.
they don't want to say anything about him.
Yeah, but we know that he was deranged. I mean, he's even admitted it, so let go of that, I think. At some schools, he would have been labeled a band geek, but music carried a lot of weight at Birchmount Collegiate Institute. Led by a highly respected teacher named Christopher Kitts, the band traveled widely, performing for fans at New York's Shea Stadium and flying to Germany, where they won a competition in Frankfurt.
Well, this is pretty big-time stuff.
Yeah, I think it's pretty impressive. It was a good school.
It was.
Yeah.
Well, it was one of the big-time preparatory schools.
Right, yeah.
So in his first year of high school, Russell got into the senior band, but he made it clear that he didn't have any time to fool around. He became a practical joker, but he developed a reputation as a snob, which was a label that would stick into his adulthood.
Well, he did seem cocky. Even in his interrogation, he did have a cockiness, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I think the people that were willing to talk on record about him, they all described him as pretty cocky.
But maybe to be a colonel and be that high up, there has to be a certain amount of cockiness, I would think.
Well, yeah, cockiness or self-assurance or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I guess you could be self-assured and be humble as well, but he wasn't.
You got to have it.
Right, yeah. Tony Callahan, a percussionist who rose to the senior band with Russell, said, "I know he kind of thought of himself as being better than other people. That was part of the reason I didn't really care for him. There was just an air about him, the way he talked. It was almost the way he would kind of roll his eyes at you if you said something. He was very condescending, according to Tony."
Yeah, and who needs that in high school?
Yeah, this is way back in high school.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
As Russell reached grade 11, and I'll just remind people that in Canada there's 13 grades before you go into college.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
So you do kind of like a postgraduate year, and then you go into college. But anyway, so grade 11, which would in the United States be junior year, was kind of like sophomore year in Canada.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, but anyway, as he got to grade 11, the family moved to South Korea, where his stepfather had been hired to oversee the construction of a nuclear plant in Busan. Boys attended a school for expatriate children, but Russell later described the year abroad as not a happy experience. He was teased by Korean kids and was called a Yankee, and he told a roommate in university later on that he was disgusted at how Korean men spit at Caucasian women. Anyway, the few reminders of Asia they brought back was a love of baseball. Not sure about why he developed that, but baseball,
it's a popular sport there.
a kimono that he used as a housecoat, and an Iowa stereo that he cherished.
Yes. So, back in Toronto, his parents decided to send him and his brother Harvey away to boarding school.
Yeah, because they stayed in Korea.
Yes, so they chose one that would have appealed to his more serious sensibilities, Upper Canada College.
And this is another big-time school.
Right.
So although the family had no ties with the elite school for boys, and it was inexpensive and had high standards for enrollment, a family member says Jerry Sofka's impressive CV helped to persuade administrators of the children's potential. So I'm reading into that maybe some money was slipped.
I don't know. I thought maybe he just had some pull, but you could be right.
Whatever.
However he did it.
He did it. So Russell was assigned to a corner room in Wedd's house, one of the UCC's dorms. But he didn't exactly fit in there.
No, I mean, at the boarding school, a lot of guys like to goof around and have some fun. His former roommate said that. And speaking on the condition that he not be named, he also said that Russell was always serious and didn't really get into any banter, joking, or friendship like the other guys did. So he said it was very difficult just to have a basic conversation with Russell. He said, I can't even recall him having a single person that he spent a lot of time with. He was kind of a loner.
He was. And they didn't have much in common. Russell liked to play his trumpet and study, while his roommate was into girls.
Yeah, so this kind of kills me. Russell used to listen to Diana Ross, the same song over and over. So that's super weird.
Well, it is.
And
I would just... No, never mind, not going there. I was going to make some derogatory comment about Diana, but no, I'm going to leave that alone.
Say what you will about Diana Ross, she's a strange choice for a teenage boy or a young man. And during this time, his roommates were more into the Clash, the Talking Heads.
Well, sure.
But Russell wasn't. He'd listen to this Diana Ross song, and he also would fold his laundry, like precision, very neatly. And across the room where his roommate lived, the stuff piled up like, most teenage boys allow it to.
Well, yeah.
Now, the only time they were forced to be together, these two, was the nightly study hour. And they spent that in silence, pretty much. There wasn't a lot of talking going on or a lot of relating to each other.
Yeah, no, that's strange. I mean, you're in a two-person room. You don't interact with the other person. I mean, when I went to college, my roommate and I talked all the time.
It depends who your roommate is. I mean, it does happen. I've heard other people who they just didn't have the right roommate.
Well, yeah, but you still are polite.
Well, they're not saying they weren't polite.
It sounds like they didn't have any real contact with each other.
Well, he's saying that Russell really wasn't the type of person you could chat with. Now, still, these differences were pretty superficial, and you would think they would be surmountable. But Russell refused to open up, according to this roommate. And the roommate also said that his parents had recently gotten divorced at the time, so theoretically they had something in common and they could have bonded over that. But he didn't think it was something that Russell even would speak to him about. It was never something that he would mention about his parents or try to do any kind of bonding or sharing. So he was just kind of cut off, according to this roommate. This is one person's opinion.
Well, I mean, if you think of the former UCC bandmates, teachers, and staff, those who agreed to talk about Russell Williams, and there weren't that many, right?
Right, yeah.
So he's flying under the radar. They all agreed that they could think of no one close to him. So, yeah, we're getting a picture of this guy who's a loner, who might be, I don't want to say depressed, but by himself.
Yep, troubled in some way.
Now, and he didn't join the cadet corps, which they had. It was a big program at UCC.
Back then he wasn't really into the military yet.
No, he wasn't. I mean, that was kind of a surprise, I guess, as we go further on. But, yeah.
In his final year, he served as a prefect, and that's a position often decided by student vote. But the UCC alumni recall that he was selected by the staff, and he moved to a floor that was reserved by students in grades 9 and 10, and it was his job to keep the youngsters in check. Now, in a 1982 yearbook, Russell quoted one of his favorite musicians, Louis Armstrong, and the quote was, "If you have to ask what jazz is, you'll never know." Which, that's fine, but it does seem a little snobbish.
It does.
Yeah.
Maybe
he kind of liked separating himself a bit.
He could have. And UCC has an active alumni network that maintains a password-protected online database that old boys, such as Russell, could use to keep track of each other. No, there's no contact information. He's listed as lost.
So that's kind of, weird.
Isn't it?
It just kind of gives you a little look into who he is. I mean, that thing alone is not a big deal, but just when you put all these things together, you're kind of seeing an image of the kind of person he was. Now, if the first few weeks were any indication, Russell was destined to experience the same isolation as a student at the University of Toronto's Scarborough campus. He was assigned to live with 5 other students in Unit C8, and that was a townhouse in a cluster of brown brick residence buildings. Before his roommates had a chance to even figure out where their classes were, Russell announced who was going to buy what meals that week, who was scheduled to do the cooking, and how they would rotate through the jobs that he assigned each of them. So that's crazy.
Yeah, so he's like the drill sergeant to people he's not even met yet.
Right, yeah.
This is your thing, this is yours. Boy.
Totally OCD.
Isn't it?
Yeah, to an extreme.
So he was pretty bossy. And his roommate, who became one of his best friends, Jeff Farquhar, said, "This is one dude I'm going to keep my distance from."
Yeah.
Just because he was a little bossy.
Yeah, a little bossy. Sounds like he was a lot bossy.
It does.
And he was so orderly, focused, and authoritative, keeping his own room spotless and persuading his roommates to wear slippers, that nicknames came really fast and furious toward him, like Drill Sergeant, Sergeant Major, and even Mother Goose.
So it got so bad that Jeff Farquhar, who, as we said, became one of his closest friends, teased him about being obsessive-compulsive. Farquhar said, "I don't know if he was diagnosed, but I know damn well, without being a doctor, that if he's not, I don't know who could be."
Well, it sounds like he's right, from what we've heard.
Yeah, at least from that part.
Yeah.
Sure.
So then something changed. For some reason, Russell lightened up a little bit. He was armed with his trumpet, and he gathered a dozen students and gave them garbage can lids and drumsticks, and they paraded around campus, blasting the Beatles' Yellow Submarine song. So he regularly unleashed his high-pitched laugh. It was like a half-gasp, half-eruption that some of his roommates still imitate. Now, he still abstained from partying, though. He studied with the discipline of a monk and folded his laundry with precision. But he lost a little bit of the edge that had turned people off in the beginning. And he also started to expand his repertoire of pranks, and he became known for what one friend called his off-the-wall sense of humor. And let's talk about that a little bit, because that shows a little bit of the eccentricities and warning signs of his behavior.
Yeah, I think you could look at that both ways. I mean, definitely eccentric, but maybe some warning signs. So Farquhar told the Globe and Mail, that's a newspaper in Toronto, that one time Russell got the roommates together to watch him disassemble the door lock to prevent the last one from entering late at night. So he just adjusted the tumbler pins in the lock to work with the key from their common laundry room. Now, the roommate comes in and tries to do the room key. Can't get in. Who would think to use the laundry room key?
But isn't that just a strange skill to have developed?
No kidding.
But he must have had some kind of interest in lock picking.
Well, yeah.
So that's definitely a warning sign, I think.
So yeah, the roommates wondered where he learned to change and pick locks. No one ever asked him.
No, but it was a skill that he continued to demonstrate during other pranks and throughout his college career.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, on the surface, a pretty cool skill.
It is a cool skill if that's all it was.
Yeah.
But considering his criminal future,
We're not sure.
It's a bit alarming.
Right. And then taking friends off guard was another prank Russell seemed to enjoy. He liked to lurk quietly for long periods of time inside a dark closet, waiting until the roommates were least expecting it so he could jump out and scare them.
Now, this is something we read about with Ted Bundy
Right.
and Gary Ridgway,
And
two serial
Ridgway.
killers.
Exactly. That they like to jump out and surprise people.
They like to scare people. Gary Ridgway used to like to take his wife out and scare her.
Yeah. So that's in retrospect a red flag. I mean, at the time he's a college kid and he's just fucking around. So.
Oh no, I think it was creepy from the beginning. I mean, we're not talking about hiding in the closet for a few minutes. He would lurk in the closet for hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
still,
someone would come home, he's in the closet when they get home, they might have dinner, take a shower, sit down to do their homework, and then halfway in their homework he jumps out. That's creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that kind of patience just shows a real weirdness to me. That's not normal. That's beyond being a prankster to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like that.
I think so. But, I mean, everybody looked at it as just screwing around type stuff.
Well, I don't know if everybody did. The people who have talked have.
Yeah.
There might be people who haven't spoken that were really quite concerned with it. We don't know. Now, also, he was kind of obsessive when it came to money because Russell had to account for every penny.
Yeah, well, that goes along with his OCD personality.
Right. Now, upon returning from the local sports bar, Jeff said he would see him pull out a clipboard and write down how much he'd spent on his chicken wings and his 2 bottles of Labatt's.
Never more than 2.
Which, yeah, so he only had 2.
Right.
Now, that makes me wonder, and I don't know, but sometimes when people limit their drinking like that, there's something they're keeping in check, that they're afraid if the real them gets exposed by getting their defenses knocked down too much by drinking, letting their inhibitions down. It's a sign of control either way. I know you're looking at me like that's a stretch, but it's definitely a sign of someone who needs to be in control.
Okay, I think that's true.
Especially in college.
I would also look at it as a guy who's pinching pennies and watching his money.
But he didn't really need to do that.
Well, he didn't, but he thought he did. And Labatt's is a pretty low alcohol beer, so you have to drink a pile of them.
I knew you'd have to make a comment
really
about the
get
beer.
disinhibited.
Well, I guess.
So I'm looking at it as more, I only want to pay this much money for my night out, and that means I can have 2 beers.
It's nice of you to look at it that way. I see it as a little more sinister.
That could be.
Now, by the time he had his degree in politics and economics, his stepfather had become chief engineer of another big project, the Canada-France-Hawaii telescope, perched atop a dormant volcano.
Out in Hawaii.
Pretty cool.
I mean, this is way cool. I love astronomy.
Yes, I know.
And this is some cool stuff. He's going to build or help build a telescope.
The stepfather, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, his biological father, meanwhile, had remarried, and he was living in Schenectady, New York, corporate headquarters of General Electric. So these are 2 successful guys. I think Russell could have afforded more than 2 beers, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt if you want.
Well, I'm just looking at his penny-pinching ways and thinking that in his mind he can only afford 2 beers.
Okay.
Well, that's all.
That's okay.
I mean, maybe I'm kind of a penny pincher myself.
Well,
but
that's true. You are a little bit. Nowhere to that extreme, but yeah, you are careful about money more than I am. So another thing during college is that his roommates remember no parental visits. So that's kind of sad. Jeff Farquhar says the one trip Russell made to Hawaii really stunned him. He was flabbergasted because Russell rarely left campus and he never spent money on trips like that.
Yeah.
And,
well, he didn't spend money. His mother and stepfather spent the money.
But to go to your side, maybe his parents weren't giving him much money. Maybe they were cheap. And he did have to use his own money. We don't know.
Right, we don't.
So it could be that way as well.
Yeah, so we don't know whether the family relations were strained. We don't know whether his family relations were strained or whether his detachment was a product of his independence, or maybe some of both. The only thing that stuck out is that he seemed a bit lonely, one of his roommates said. He rarely talked about his family. But there was one benefit for Russell to being on campus so much. During one of his early breaks, when everyone else was back in their hometowns, he met a young woman who would be his girlfriend until his final year of college. So this is like his first serious girlfriend.
Well, first only girlfriend, right? Since
we
high
don't-
school.
We don't know only.
Since Sarah.
we know it's his first serious girlfriend.
So their appearance together, by all accounts, was striking. Russell stood around 6 feet tall. He was wiry from all the squash, tennis, and jogging. And his girlfriend was a student from Japan, more than a foot shorter than he was. But in her company, the drill sergeant, as they called him, seemed to be drained of his authority, the roommates would say. He was a different person with her around. Now, they said that she ran him like a whipped horse. It was always her way or the highway, and she always wanted to hit the books harder, and she didn't have a lot of time for Russell either.
No, studies came first.
But he did as she wanted. And I would also say that with his wife. It seems like he liked a woman who would tell him what to do and kind of boss him around.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, they would argue a little bit about finding time and spending more time together, but she was really the one in charge. Now, also, the girlfriend rarely spent the night at their place, and Russ often came home late, and he was disappointed that she didn't come home with him.
So he's over at her place trying to convince him to come to his place, or
spend the night with him in some way.
Yeah, didn't work.
No.
So how active were they together? I mean, they're boyfriend-girlfriend, but it doesn't sound like they were a real couple.
Well, I think they were a real couple. We just don't know if they were sexually active. They never saw them touch each other physically in public, one roommate recalled. And in the 4th year, the girlfriend decided the relationship was over. Now this, according to Jeff, crushed Russ, and it prompted him to withdraw completely from his friends. He would return from class, he'd lock himself in his room with his stereo, and he wouldn't come out until the next day. It was the only time that his friend actually heard him cry also.
He was upset.
Yeah.
So he campaigned to win her back, but he failed. He sent his girlfriend a dozen long-stem roses, but she sent him back, and she talked to his roommate, Jeff Farquhar, and said, make him stop.
Yeah, he wasn't giving up.
No, he was persevering, but
No.
it wasn't going to work.
No.
Now today, the former girlfriend declines to comment on the relationship or how Russell reacted to the breakup. She said, all I can say is, whatever my experience was, I don't think it will be of any use. So that kind of echoes what other people are saying. They don't want to talk about him, or they decline to talk about him.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. But Jeff recalls the post-breakup time as a very upsetting time for Russell. He wasn't dating anyone. If the guys were going out to dinner or a dance, Russell would stay home. And Jeff remembers saying to him at one point, you don't even have to bring a date, just come out with us. But he refused. So this resistance continued even after university. It actually wasn't until about 4 years after this breakup, when Russ met his wife, Mary Elizabeth Harriman, that he resumed dating. So that's quite remarkable for a young man.
4 years.
4 years.
Yep.
Very strange.
In his sexual prime.
Right, yep.
Right.
Very strange.
Now this was also an extremely spooky time on the university campus. They'd been rocked by a succession of attacks and unsolved rapes. At night, male students were escorting women home from class. Now, several years later, infamous serial killer Paul Bernardo, and we've heard about him.
A little bit. I don't know much about him.
He and his wife or girlfriend, Carol Homolka, were convicted of I don't know how many rapes and killings.
Wow. Okay.
So anyway, Bernardo graduated from this school in 1987, which is a year after Russell, and he confessed to having committed several of the sex crimes.
Yeah, so we don't know who did the other ones, and it's interesting that Russell Williams was there at that time. That's the point of this, right?
Yeah, because you're thinking maybe this is how he got his start.
Yeah, because now shortly after Russell was arrested, the Toronto Sun would report that the two had been pals as students and partied together. But according to people who were there and their roommates, they probably didn't even meet.
No, I would believe that.
So we just don't know if maybe Russell Williams did some of these crimes. I mean, it wouldn't be too surprising considering what he does later in life and the fact that he was kind of abstinent for quite a bit of the time.
There's that, but if we look at later on how he progressed, I'm not sure he was responsible for rapes at that time.
Oh, so you think if he raped, then he would be going back and re-escalating?
Yeah. So
maybe.
I'm thinking, as we'll see, that he graduated from break-ins and doing stuff to underwear, to rapes, to murder.
Sure, but that doesn't rule it out for me. It's still
No,
possible.
I think it's, well, just because he went to school at the same time and Bernardo didn't confess to all of them.
Sure.
Although why would he?
Well, I don't know. It seems like a lot of these serial killers will like to confess to things once they're caught. They like to get credit, don't they?
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. We just don't know, but it is an interesting thing just to mention, I believe. I found it interesting.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Just the proximity in time.
Yeah.
Because Bernardo and Homolka are pretty infamous in Canada.
Now I'll have to read about that because I have to honestly say I wasn't really familiar with that. That might be something to look into. So anyway, after Russell earned his degree, he spent another year in Scarborough trying to decide what he was going to do with his life. He lived alone in a basement apartment, working part-time at the university, and he also waited tables at the local Red Lobster. Now, he applied to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and underwent a rigorous background check and interviews, but then he turned it down after an offer of employment. He was still waiting to hear back from his first choice, and that was the Canadian Forces. Now, an uncle of Jeff Farquhar owned a Cessna and had on occasion let Russell take the controls while they were up in the air. Also, Hollywood provided some inspiration for him because I guess he was really into the movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise. And it turns out he was watching that movie over and over again, almost a little obsessed with it, from what Jeff had said. So it wasn't lost on his friends that for most of the movie, the fighter pilot that Tom Cruise played was persisting in trying to win over the affections of a woman. So that could have started when he was trying to win back that college girlfriend.
Well, I guess. But, I mean, he told his friend Jeff that what he wanted to do was be a pilot. And that was kind of out from left field.
Right, but his friend seemed to think it was related to Top Gun. His friend clearly said that.
Well, maybe the excitement about being an ace pilot.
Well,
I mean,
yes.
This has been a while since his breakup.
It could absolutely be the excitement of being a pilot.
So I'm not sure it was related to that, but he wanted to be a pilot, which came as a surprise to his friends, or those who considered him friends.
It was a new thing.
And it must have been something that he really wanted to do, because he could have been a Mountie. They accepted him.
Right, yep.
And he said, no, thank you, I'm going to wait to hear from the other guys.
I know. Maybe it would have been more dangerous if he was a Mountie. He might have had more contact and power one-on-one with women.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But he certainly had a lot of power where he ended up.
Well, he did, but it didn't seem to apply to his crimes very much.
No. Well, anyway.
Whereas if you're a policeman, you can kind of get access to people through that job.
Yeah, but he might not have been thinking about that at the time.
Well, let's hope not, but we don't know.
Anyway, in 1987, he began his military career. He got into flight school, or whatever it was called. He was an officer cadet of the Air Force. Now, he advanced pretty quickly. Within 4 months, he was already a second lieutenant. Now, it took him 3 years to earn his wings while he took flight courses and got behind the controls of a Canadair Tudor CT-114 jet. During a trip to Calgary, he was introduced to Mary Elizabeth Harriman, and she was 5 years older than him, with short dark hair and glasses.
Yeah, she had kind of a librarian look about her.
Sounds like.
Now, as they began dating and their relationship progressed, Russell made the full day's drive to visit her in Calgary on his days off. Mary had come from an esteemed military background. Now, her father was a decorated soldier who'd helped storm the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. After 5 years overseas during World War II, her father had come home and studied geology. And Mary was the only child of her parents. She got a bachelor's degree in applied science and a master's degree in adult education. Now, Mary's parents were really impressed with Russell Williams when they met him, and they welcomed him with open arms. In 1990, he was posted in Manitoba, teaching new recruits to fly the plane, and Mary went to see him. They lived in a small second-floor apartment together, and they bought a black and white cat that they named Curio, which was short for curiosity, not the Allagash beer.
I was going to say that. How'd you know?
I just know you. Now, they were a quiet couple who kept to themselves, and they ended up getting married in 1991.
Yeah, but while they were married, if Russell didn't introduce Mary to people as his wife, they would probably assume she was just a friend, because there was absolutely no public affection, They were very formal and proper. Now, by the time her husband was busy piloting the rich and powerful, Mary had taken a job as a lobbyist with the Heart and Stroke Foundation in Ottawa.
Well, Mary was quiet and reserved, but more open than Russell, the neighbors would report. Russell was an avid runner, and although they didn't have children, or probably because they didn't have children, they treated their cat as their surrogate child. Now, when Curio was euthanized due to an age-related illness later, the couple was devastated, and they adopted another black and white kitten, who they named Rosebud. Now, also, Russell seemed to love his car, his BMW, and he was known to spend many warm days washing and polishing it in the driveway in their neighborhood, and when people would walk by, he'd smile and wave at them.
Yeah, meanwhile, Russell's moving up in rank. In 1999, he's promoted to the rank of Major with the position of Director General Military Careers. He served as a multi-engine pilot, vocational manager, and he helped to assess and guide the careers of senior Air Force personnel by planning their postings and deployments. So he's really moving up in the world.
He's moving up quickly, yeah.
So he got his Master's of Defense Studies diploma in 2004, got promoted to a lieutenant colonel, and then appointed as the commanding officer of 437 Transport Squadron at CFB Trenton. This is a unit of about 80 people whose duties included escorting dignitaries and transporting the Prime Minister and other VIPs. So this is a big-time promotion.
It is, and he had high security clearance.
Yeah.
Now, Russell socialized very little around the base, but he did maintain a very professional image. Now, Lucy Critch, who worked for the 437 Squadron, told Dateline's Keith Morrison,
Your hero.
my hero, "I never saw Colonel Williams upset. He was very low-key, very even, and easily approachable." And I'm sure that Keith gave her one of his nice nods.
Right, with his hand under his chin.
Yes, right. So upon starting his supervisory position at Trenton, Russell bought a small waterfront cottage on Cozy Cove Lane in Tweed, and this was near the base.
Yeah, so he didn't have to make this long commute, so he stayed there.
Mm-hmm.
What, Monday through Friday, basically?
Pretty much during the week, so he didn't have to commute, and then on weekends, Mary would sometimes drive down and relax with him at the cottage. On weekends, neighbors could see Mary reading a book and relaxing on the porch, while Russell did lawn maintenance.
Yeah, so he was there basically 7 days a week, and she was there maybe 2 days a week.
Yeah, so he had a lot of alone time, which is important here.
A lot of free time.
Because she's back in Ottawa during the week, and he was rarely seen outside the house during the week unless he was out for a run. So he seemed less social when Mary wasn't there, which was interesting.
Right. Now, on the night of September 8th, 2007, Russell broke into a neighbor's cottage while the family was away, and he took photographs of himself in pornographic poses with their 12-year-old daughter's underwear, some of which he stole. In the home, he took off his clothes and pulled on a pair of the 12-year-old's pink panties before posing for some more self-portraits. And in other photos, he stood in front of her bedroom mirror with her panties dangling from his erect penis. He set up a tripod and masturbated on her bed. He spent 3 hours in their home, took 36 pictures. I guess it's not unexpected, maybe, but it seems like all of his...
I think it's pretty unexpected.
All right, let's go back.
All right, explain what you mean.
This is unexpected from him.
I think so. I mean, unless you're putting together some kind of psychological profile of him beforehand.
No, we don't have anything beforehand other than some of the unsolved rapes on the University of Toronto campus.
Which we have no idea if that was related to him at all.
We have no idea. So this was something, wow, out of left field.
Well, and it's really sick. We're talking about a 12-year-old who he knew.
Right.
Who was a neighbor. And...
They were next-door neighbors, weren't they?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
So he broke into the house again on September 28th, so a couple weeks later, when the family was away for a funeral. And this time he actually spent 7 hours in the girl's bedroom. And we know this because of the timestamps on the photos that he took with a digital camera.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kept extensive records.
He sure did, yeah.
And that's once he confessed and broke down and described where he had things hidden. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes. So before we get more into it, I'd just like to talk for a minute about our sponsors. Have you been thinking of going back to college? Whether you're attending for the first time or you're going back to complete a degree, there are 3 common financial aid mistakes most students make that you can avoid. Discover them and Southern New Hampshire University by texting EXPERT to 554433. SNHU's mission is to make higher education affordable and accessible to everyone. They're devoted to learning and they're nonprofit, so they've made their New England campus available to the entire world by offering complete degree programs online. While tuition is skyrocketing across the country, SNHU hasn't raised their online tuition in years. With online classes, you can get your degree while the kids are at school or even after they go to bed in the evenings. But remember, when you do choose to get your education, you really owe it to yourself and your family to learn about these top 3 financial aid mistakes and to avoid them by texting EXPERT to 554433. That's EXPERT to 554433. And like I've told you before, going to the salon can be a real luxury, but it can also be very expensive, and I find it a little too time-consuming with my busy life. And sometimes it's a little overrated. I've been getting my hair colored at the salon for years, and I honestly never thought that I would color my hair at home again since I did it in college. Those drugstore boxes I used back then were really scary. I'd have different colors of hair, and I could never really get it to look good. But that was before Madison Reed entered my life and gave me more time and money. Madison Reed is revolutionizing the way we color our hair with the ultimate hair color hack, the quality of salon color with the convenience and affordability that I can really support. Join me in getting multi-dimensional hair color from Italy delivered to your home on your schedule, and it's all for under $25. Find your perfect shade at madison-reed.com. Madison Reed is honoring our True Crime Brewery listeners with 10% off and free shipping on your first color kit with the promo code BREWERY. That's madison-reed.com, and just use the promo code BREWERY. You'll get 10% off and free shipping.
And I would only add that your hair looks great.
Thank you. And it smells good, too. It really is a great smelling product. It doesn't have any ammonia, so it's really nice.
It is good.
Now, back to our story. After Russell returned to work in Ottawa and shared a bed with his wife during the week, he would still return to the cottage in Tweed on weekends. In the months that followed, Russell Williams broke into other residences in Tweed and the Belleville area. Now, beginning in May of 2008, there were a rash of similar crimes occurring in the vicinity of his home in Ottawa. So not only in Cozy Cove, but in Ottawa.
Yeah. So you're starting to see maybe a pattern, although nobody discerned the pattern until after the arrest.
Or close to the arrest, sure.
So Williams victimized families whose members included girls or young women. He entered the residences at night when the people were away. In some cases, he made return visits. Just double creepy.
Yeah.
To me.
He'd go back again and again sometimes.
Sometimes he walked in through unlocked doors. Other times he'd cut a screen, force a window open, pick a lock. But he would always find a way to get in. So remember we talked about his lock-picking skills as a college student.
Yeah,
looks like he's putting them to good use.
Yeah, they're coming in handy now.
During all these burglaries, Williams took photographs of female undergarments, and he took pictures of himself wearing brasiers and panties. When he finally left, he took underwear as trophies. Now, there's like 82 documented burglaries. He stole around 1,400 pieces of clothing, most of it underwear and lingerie.
Yeah, but sometimes he'd even take dresses, shoes. He'd take all kinds of things.
But all female things.
Well, absolutely. Now, most of his victims remained oblivious to the fact that their homes had been violated, and only one report was made in Tweed and 15 in Ottawa out of the 48 homes he had raided. Now, the photos were meticulously filed into folders on his computer. Same computer he shared with his wife, by the way.
Yeah. Now, does she not know his password to get into these? I mean, are these protected things?
Well, I don't know if they were really protected. I've read that they were somewhat hidden, but...
Yeah. See, I'm not a computer-savvy enough person to know.
Well, even if they are protected, I would think if your spouse goes into the computer and sees that you have these protected files, you might wonder what they're hiding from you.
And you can see those protected files. I mean, you can't see the files themselves, but you can see that there are files protected.
I would think so, depending how he did it, but I would think so.
So, yeah, that'd make me wonder.
Now, each folder had a date. It had the address and the name of the victim. It also had the number of items taken, and whatever else he found noteworthy, he would put in that file. Now, he would further split these into subfolders, and he'd give them names, such as bedroom, bedroom laundry, daughter's collection. So, I mean, when you say meticulous, that's almost putting it mildly. This is craziness.
It is.
Now, at times during his 2-year crime spree here, Russell added to his activity. He was showing that he was escalating in the nature and in the intensity of his crimes, and you could even see that in the things he stole and how much time he spent taking pictures and his behavior when he was alone in the houses. You can see how it's beginning to escalate.
But this is all stuff that he confessed to, and he kept such good records that the police could go back and look at him. But
they didn't even really need the confession because they could certainly find it all.
Well, they needed the confession in the sense that he would tell them where to find the things he had hidden.
Sure. Yeah, but I think they would eventually found most of it anyway.
Now, to me, this is where he starts escalating things. In 2008, in June, he broke into an Ottawa home and he stole a sex toy belonging to a 24-year-old woman. The next day, he took a photo of his penis on top of the sex toy, and then he used a software program to write on a computer screen, "Merci beaucoup." So this is where, I mean, he's been anonymous to begin with.
Right.
And now he's gotten into the point where he's writing things on computer screens.
Which kind of shows me that he's longing for the reaction. He wants to get closer into contact with these people.
I think so.
And there were a couple of episodes where he went on computers and did things like this. There was the woman who had all the sex toys, and he wrote something on her computer.
That's this one.
No, but there was another one where he said, I'll show them all your big dildos or something. Or it was the same woman.
Right.
But he did write more things on the computer.
Yes, he did.
And there was a girl where he wrote merci on her computer as well, so it wasn't only just the one. Now, in September 2009, after escalating with his peeping Tom and panty-stealing crimes, Russell Williams crept toward the home of a 21-year-old single woman, and she would become the first woman to have a personal encounter with him.
She certainly was.
So he's really escalated here. As you said, this is the beginning of...
This is his downward path.
Exactly.
So we don't know how he chose his victim. He told police later that he had seen her while passing by her house in his boat, but he could have also been jogging past her home on his evening runs, and he could have looked in and seen her through her windows. But anyway, he picked her out somehow.
Well, I think he would have had to stop and look in the window.
Yeah.
You can't really see much going by in a boat or running past.
I know. I think he was stalking.
Absolutely. I think he did a lot of that. So he got into her house and he victimized her.
So he spent a couple hours forcing the young woman to strip and to pose for lewd photos as he fondled her.
So after violating her, he returned to the cottage for a few hours to sleep before leaving for an important meeting with the Criminal Intelligence Service at the Ramada Inn. So here you see the two sides of him really getting closer together, right?
Absolutely.
But he doesn't seem to have any problem separating these two.
No, he can go from doing this stuff to his military duties without a problem.
No.
Or without an apparent problem.
Yeah, several nights later, he climbed through an open window and he stole a pair of panties from his neighbor, Lori Massacott. Now, he took photos of her bedroom, including her underwear drawer, and he took some family photos off the counter and took them home. Now, in late September, he returned to Lori's house again in the very early morning, and this is when he actually sexually assaulted her. He photographed Lori repeatedly in demeaning poses in various stages of undress, and after causing her to fear for her life, he left her naked and shaking on the floor. So he was there for 3.5 hours, and she was terrified that he was going to kill her. Now, unbelievably to me, he returned to her house 2 more times after that, when she wasn't home, and took more photos of himself in her underwear and clothing.
Yeah, he did.
So that's crazy.
Now, this was a neighbor of his.
Yep.
And Lori told police that she thought the voice resembled another neighbor named Larry Jones.
Right. Now, she was an older woman compared to most of his victims. She was in her 40s.
She was. And Larry Jones was kind of the unofficial mayor of Cozy Cove.
Right, yeah.
He knew everything that was going on. But she told the police that the voice sounded like him.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't actually arrested, but he came under intense scrutiny.
Yeah, he was held and interrogated.
Right. And everybody knew.
So everybody looked at him like he was probably the one who did it.
So the assumption is that he's guilty.
Yeah, by a lot of people.
Yeah. Took him a long time to get out from under that.
It did. Now, by November 2009, Williams' crimes escalated to murder. On the night of November 23rd in Brighton, a town just west of Trenton, he broke into the home of Corporal Marie-France Como, who was under his command at CFB Trenton. Now, Como put up a fight. She was struck on the head several times with his flashlight. So for about 2 hours, he repeatedly raped her. He beat her viciously. He recorded it all on video with photographs. Now, he asphyxiated her by wrapping her face with duct tape, and he wrapped her body in a duvet and left it in her bedroom, where she laid undiscovered for more than 30 hours.
Yeah, this is a big escalation.
It's really huge,
I mean,
yeah.
He's gone from
peeping Tom and stealing underwear,
right,
to sexually assaulting and raping women,
right, killing women.
And now to killing women.
The psychiatrist that evaluated him considered him a necrophiliac because he was having intercourse with unconscious or dead women.
Taping her face with duct tape so she can't breathe, that's a miserable thing to go through.
It's a horrible way to die, isn't it?
Yeah. Everyone says she was just a wonderful person, and I know we say that about the victims all the time, but it really does seem to be true. Now, she was born in April in 1972, and she joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1995. She worked as a flight attendant at CFB Trenton. She lived in Brighton alone with her 2 cats. Now, Colonel Russell Williams acknowledged that he once met her during a military flight, and as commander, he had access to her personal information. So that's significant, including her schedule, her address, her phone number. So he'd actually used some of this inside information to get access to her, I believe.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt that he did.
Yeah.
So she was fulfilling her life's dream as a flight attendant.
Yes.
She worked hard.
She wanted to travel the world.
And she did. She served aboard military VIP flights that ferried in dignitaries on domestic and overseas trips. She had been serving honorably in the military for 12 years. Her friends, family, and even acquaintances described her as having a passion for life and adventure. A sweet, generous, happy, kind, charming, intelligent, generous, beautiful, adorable, funny.
Yeah, with a really silly sense of humor, they said.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and thinking I'm just kind of reading it over, but she was a wonderful person.
Yeah, really just a ball of energy, too.
Yeah, someone you'd like to know.
Yeah. She's very much missed. People loved her, and she did love her job, too. So she was enjoying her life when it was stolen from her. On the night of her murder, Russell Williams parked about 600 to 700 meters from her home in a wooded area, and he walked through the wooded area, breaking into her home through a basement window at the back of the house. Now, while he was in her home, he confirmed that she lived alone by looking and making sure there were no men's clothes or anything. And he remained in the home for more than an hour during the first break-in. He took 18 images of himself modeling her underwear and putting a sex toy in the undergarment, taking pictures of that.
So he had been like a reconnaissance mission.
Yes, at least one, probably more.
He had been there before she was aware.
Yes.
Or before she was there.
Yes.
Okay.
So Marie-France noticed upon return from her trip that someone had been through her undergarments. Now, she blamed it on her boyfriend, but he denied it.
Yeah. Yeah, why would I steal your underwear and sex toys?
Well, we don't know what her boyfriend was like, but clearly he didn't do it.
No.
Now, Russell had turned his BlackBerry off upon leaving that night. and he could hear her speaking on the phone in her bedroom. He took this kit that he had made with him, kind of like a rape kit, a murder kit, really tools of his trade, I guess.
Yes.
And he entered through that basement window again. Now, he concealed himself near the furnace area for about 30 to 40 minutes, waiting for her to go to bed. So this just reminds me of when he was in college, and that's why it's so creepy.
Yes.
Now, she didn't go to bed, though. Instead, she went to look for one of her cats, and the cat was standing near him in the basement, looking at him. So when she went downstairs, she noticed him, which must have been so terrifying.
Can you imagine that?
No, I can't. When she saw him...
She's looking for a cat, and she goes downstairs, and there's a guy hiding next to the furnace.
Well, it's like our worst nightmare of any woman. Now, when she saw him, she didn't know who it was because his face was covered. And he subdued her right away by striking her many times in the head with his flashlight. So a tie and blood drops were later found on this basement floor. Now, on January 28, 2010, that was a Friday, he set off to commit a crime that he had spent years fantasizing about. He was going to capture another young, attractive woman, and he wanted to make her his sex slave. Now, to ensure he wasn't identified, he knew ahead of time that he would be killing her. He went to her home, and this was a woman he'd admired from afar. Her name was Jessica Lloyd.
But he killed the first one.
Yes.
So he's escalated some more.
Well, yes, he's continuing on this course.
Right.
So any one of Jessica Lloyd's friends would describe her as someone who really loved life as well. When she laughed, it was contagious. When she smiled, it seemed sincere. And to those who loved her, her happiness was always shared with them. Her life began as a military brat. She grew up at Canadian Forces Base, Ottawa, where her dad, Warren Lloyd, worked for 25 years in the Communications Division of the Royal Canadian Navy. When he retired in 1990, he and Jessica's mother, Roxanne, and her older brother, Andy, moved to Belleville, Ontario. Now, this was to get away from the hustle and bustle of the nation's capital, and at the time, Jessica was only 8 years old.
Yeah, but it's still like a suburb. I mean, it's close by.
Right. Now, when she was 14, her father died of cancer. So this was really tough on her and her brother, and her mother, too, I'm sure. Jessica graduated with a 3-year business and human resources diploma from Loyalist College. Her friends described her as someone who always captured everyone's attention when she walked into the room, and if you're to look at a picture of her, she was a beautiful young woman. She was a beautiful girl with long flowing brown hair and piercing green eyes. She also loved hockey. She was very excited for the Winter Olympic Games in Vancouver. Her biggest wish, though, was to be able to see her beloved Toronto Maple Leafs win a Stanley Cup. So she was loud, and she quickly became known to her tight-knit group of friends for clever one-liners. She was also extremely close to her brother, and she would lovingly tease him about being able to speed faster on her black Ninja motorcycle than he could on his. So both of these women that he killed were very adventurous, wouldn't you say?
Motorcycles?
Yep.
Wow.
So Jessica actually went missing on January 28, 2009. Now, she was doing what she usually did on that day. She spent time with her friends. She arrived home that night to her house on Highway 37. This was her childhood home that she'd purchased from her mother a few months before. So that's pretty impressive. She's already bought her own home in her late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So once she got back home, she called the same friend and she told him that she'd made it home safely. And this would be the last time that any of her loved ones, her friends, would hear from her.
And that same January night, Russell Williams lay in wait in the bushes in her backyard, and he attacked her after she fell asleep. Now, he spent hours manipulating her body into different poses, then took her to his own cottage and continued to sexually assault her. So this is like almost a 24-hour ordeal.
Yeah, he bludgeoned her with his flashlight, and he strangled her until she fell limp. Now, it was at 5:52 a.m. on the 29th, so the next morning, when he sent an email to Lieutenant Colonel Ross Federley to let him know that he would not be into work that day. He told him that he had a stomach ailment, but the curious thing is that he also told him not to tell his wife he was homesick if she called.
Yeah, what's with that?
So why would he be keeping secrets if he was actually sick, which we know he wasn't, but, who knows why men lie to their wives, though. It doesn't It's usually not murder, right? It's usually something much smaller than that.
It's more small.
Yeah. So much later that night, after he had killed Jessica and hid her body in his garage, he drove to the base. So he actually slept in his office for a while, and then he piloted a plane full of troops to a California training camp the next morning. He returned from California the next day and drove straight back to spend a couple of days with his wife in Ottawa. So all this time, her body is in his garage.
Sitting there on his garage floor.
Yeah, and he's going about life, doing his job, visiting his wife.
Now, what if his wife comes to the house and finds the body?
Well, I know, but she didn't.
No, I know. But what a risk.
He doesn't seem concerned about it. And maybe this risk-taking is something he got off on as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's getting more reckless.
Yeah. Well, he stopped only briefly, and he stopped at the Tim Hortons in Brockville, and he got some sleep in the car before he finished the trip. Now, on Tuesday, he had a meeting at the Ottawa base with members of the 426 Squadron. So all this time he's gone. Then he finally drives back to Tweed, and he needs to dispose of Jessica's body at this point.
Right. So he pulls his Pathfinder SUV into the garage and pushes the remote to close the door behind him so nobody can see what's going on.
Right.
He hoisted Jessica's stiffened body into the back of his truck, drove out to a remote spot where he carried her remains 40 feet into the bush and hid her behind a large rock.
So he knew that her body probably wouldn't be found for a while, right?
Well, yeah. That's a desolate place.
Right.
Except he told him where to find her body. Actually ended up showing her.
Well, yes, but that wasn't his plan.
No, not at the time.
No. He returned to his cottage, and he cleaned up blood stains and any other evidence and signs from this murder.
Yeah. Now, here's the cool part.
Okay.
How he gets caught.
I want to hear about this because I'm sick of hearing about him victimizing women.
Okay. So some people driving by Jessica's house noticed a car parked in the field.
And when was this?
The night she disappeared.
Okay, so the 28th.
Right.
Okay.
So they noticed this car that basically doesn't belong there because they drive this way many times a week and there's never vehicles parked there.
Okay.
So it's a striking difference.
Something they notice. It's unusual.
So they notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And they notice that it's a silver-colored SUV.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when the police are investigating what's going on, they talk to these guys, or these guys talk to the police.
Yeah, they reported it, didn't they?
They did.
But they reported it after they learned that she was missing.
Right. This is when they knew she was missing and they were trying to get information.
So the investigators had identified the distinctive tire tracks that were left in the snow there as well. And 1 week after her disappearance, they conducted an extensive canvassing of all motorists using the highway near her home. And they did this from 7 p.m. on February 4th, 2010 to 6 a.m. on February 5th. They were looking for a car with the unusual tire treads they'd found in that area where you said it was parked. Now, he was driving his Nissan Pathfinder that day, which is good because if he'd been driving the car he usually drives, the BMW, he wouldn't have been caught possibly, at least not for a while.
He would have skated. Yep.
But the officer did notice the resemblance of his tire treads, and these would be subsequently matched to the treads near Jessica's home.
Bingo.
Right. So on February 7th, 2010, the CFB Trenton base commander was at his newly built home in Ottawa, where his wife lived full-time and he lived part-time. And he was called by the OPP and asked to come in for questioning. During the 10-hour interview he gave, he confessed and he was later convicted. Now, early the next morning, that's when he led investigators to Jessica's body. It was in a secluded area on Cary Road that's about 13 miles from where he lived. And he was also charged with the death of Corporal Marie France Como. So why is this area significant? Why did he drop her body there?
Well, it's nearby Larry Jones's house.
Okay. And he had actually talked to Larry Jones about where he went hunting?
Right. And Larry was already a suspect, or had been a suspect in the rapes. So people are looking at him funny anyway. Well,
it's out where he went hunting.
Okay.
So it was curious because Larry Jones said that Russell Williams had asked him where he went hunting. and it seemed odd that he wanted to know where. So I guess Larry Jones then thought that maybe Russell Williams was trying to set him up for the murders.
He probably was, because Larry also reported that a coat and some other articles were stolen or went missing from his house.
Yeah.
And his thought is that they were going to be used to frame him as a perpetrator.
So that's possible.
I think it's more than possible.
Do you think it's true?
Yeah, I think Russell did this to set Larry up, but things supervened.
He would have to know that wouldn't work because there wasn't going to be any more evidence found at Larry's house or DNA, so it was kind of a half-assed effort, I think.
It was, but you don't think clearly anyway.
Well, he seemed to think pretty clearly. He was planning things out meticulously.
Well, no, not meticulously enough, because he got arrested.
Well, sure, but he was careful for a while.
Short time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, along with the murder charges, of course, he was charged with breaking and entering, forcible confinement, and the sexual assault of the two other women in connection with two separate home invasions near Tweed, Ontario. And that was back in September 2009 that this occurred. Now, according to reports, the women had been bound in their homes, and he had taken photos of them. So one of these women was Lori, the one who'd said that the voice of her attacker sounded like Larry.
Right.
And then she later apologized to him.
She did, but, too late.
He wasn't happy with her still.
I wouldn't be. You say, well, it kind of sounds like my neighbor.
Yeah. But, she was under severe stress. And he was cleared, so I think he kind of held a grudge.
Well, he was cleared, but his reputation was stained from that point on.
Well, I think once they found it was Russell Williams, though, then he was cleared.
At that point.
Right.
But between the times.
Sure.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes.
Well, no, I wouldn't either. Let's talk a little bit about the interrogation and the confession of Colonel Williams.
Okay.
So what about the video? It really shows a window into the way that the skilled investigators use psychology to extract confessions. It was really a great example.
Yeah, the guy investigating him or questioning him, Lieutenant Smythe, had it spot on.
Yeah, so this was a 10-hour interrogation. And he's a veteran investigator. He's the one that's going to confront Williams about the crime, so they call him to come in and talk after they make the match with the tire tracks. And then they also, when he comes in, they have him take off his boots. That's when they make the match, which is in our introduction. They make the match between the soles of his boots and the footprints outside of Jessica's house.
Right. So that's damning evidence, isn't it?
Yes, right? Absolutely.
Those are your boots?
Now, whose house was it where a policewoman actually went to the door? Was that Jessica's or Marie Como's?
Well, now, that's an interesting story. That's Jessica's house. Because besides these guys driving on the highway, a police officer saw this SUV parked near Jessica's house, and it was out of place. So she actually went to Jessica's house, knocked on the door. No answer because Jessica wasn't home yet.
And that was the night she was abducted and killed?
That was the night she was abducted and killed. So the idea is, why didn't she do anything? Why didn't this police person do anything?
Approach the vehicle? Well, he wasn't in the vehicle, right? He was lurking outside somewhere.
He was hiding, so she wouldn't have seen him. But did she identify the license plates and run the plates? I
don't know about that. That's an interesting question.
And if she did she find out who it was and just assume it couldn't have been him?
What do you mean, couldn't have been him?
Well, you identify the plates as this guy who's this big shot, the commander of the base.
Right.
And you say, well, he's not up to no good.
Oh, because of who he is.
Yeah, he's an important person.
Well, isn't that what Larry Jones said when they came to knock on his door? They asked him who lived next door.
Yeah.
And when he said Russell Williams.
And they said, well, we don't need to question him.
Right. So that's interesting.
So, or she didn't run the plates.
Maybe not. It's just a car parked somewhere where it shouldn't be. It's not like you're looking for a criminal.
There's no evidence of any malfeasance.
No, not at that point.
Right. So maybe she was just, here's this car, I'm going to check on the occupant.
Sure.
But it still sounds a little suspicious to me that if you notice that there's a car that shouldn't be there, you should go a little further.
Well, maybe she checked the plate and it wasn't a stolen car.
Well, she'd know whose plate it was.
Right, yes. So you mean after she turned up missing, she'd go right to him?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
So I'm thinking that maybe she didn't run the plates.
I think you might be right there. Yeah, that makes sense. So when they call him in to talk to him, now, I think, is it Smythe or Smith?
Smythe.
Okay, so Smythe speaks in a friendly tone to Williams. He calls him in, he thanks him for his cooperation, and boy, doesn't Russell Williams look cocky when he comes in?
Yeah, we've seen this tape.
He's chomping on gum.
Yeah, he's in charge of the situation.
Yeah, and that's probably how he usually was in life.
Yeah,
that
we
position.
have to be.
Sure.
He's the boss.
Right. But don't we see a change after a couple hours of talking?
Oh, yeah.
So Mark Mendelson, a retired homicide investigator, said that Williams has the air of someone who thinks he's not about to get caught, which I would agree with.
Right.
Now, Mendelson said he just thought he was going to outsmart everybody else and talk his way out of it. But there had to be a bit of a nervousness there. I mean, for God's sake, he's murdered people.
Yeah, but I think he's at the point where until they start making accusations, he's just going to figure, I'm not going to get caught.
I'm above it all.
Yep.
So Smythe gets down to business, though, by slowly revealing to Williams what police have found out about the murders of Jessica Lloyd and Marie France Como, as well as the attacks on the two women in Tweed. Now, several hours pass by, and Smythe makes it increasingly clear that there's heavy suspicion, and this is when he really starts confronting him.
Yeah, I like how, when we watched it, how he drops little bits of information.
Yes.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, he kind of builds up.
Basically, we got you.
He does it in a very methodical way,
Yeah.
which is a good way to approach this man because he is an intelligent man.
He is.
So he says that we need to have some honesty from you because this is really getting out of control fast. And you can see Williams starting to realize, oh shit.
Yeah, he's starting to realize I'm really fucked.
He's got his arms crossed, he's looking down. And also it's significant, one of the investigators pointed out, that he calls him Russell. He doesn't call him Colonel Williams. He doesn't want to be looking up to him. He wants him
on the same level.
Or even below him, maybe.
Or below.
Yeah, at least on an even playing field. So the hierarchy's gone, his special status is gone, which he's used to having. So that kind of brings him down and makes him more vulnerable. And the detective peeled the layers away and started presenting the evidence. Really fascinating how he smoothly segued into the confession. I mean, it kind of sneaks up on you.
It does. I mean, this cop, I don't know how much, I guess he's had training in interrogation of people.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, they have classes they go to on this.
But this seemed to be a pretty masterful interrogation.
He did a good job. I mean, you can see the growing discomfort, like we said, on Williams' face.
Yeah.
So the boot print and the tire tracks at the murder scene, they match his boots and his vehicle. And the attacks occurred in areas where Williams lived and frequented. Now, Marie France Como was also a member of the Canadian Forces who worked on the same base as Williams. So there's looming DNA evidence that will come out once they've got him as a suspect. And I think that he could realize that.
Yeah.
He's smart enough to figure that out.
They've given him all these things. He's going to say, uh-oh, my DNA's there.
Well, and all they really have to do is do a thorough search of his house, right? Because he has all the underwear
Right.
and...
I mean, he's got all that stuff, but to link him directly to the murder...
Well, I think he has pictures of the dead women, too, though.
Yeah, but his semen's left on the dead person.
Sure, that too.
So that'll do it.
Although I would think if he did these crimes to a complete stranger in a different area, he may not have been caught. There are some pretty obvious connections here they were able to make.
Well, yeah. His body language shows that defeat is beginning to sink in. He crosses his arms, he's looking at his feet, he's folding up.
You can kind of see the panic, like, oh shit, I'm not getting out of here.
Yeah, he hunches his shoulders, stays silent for long periods of time. So at this point, Williams is starting to absorb everything that's just been said to him, and it's the first time that he knows that he's caught. So, uh-oh.
Yeah.
I'm toast.
It's a moment where Williams realizes he has nowhere to go. He's got the trapped feeling. Eventually, he reveals that he's concerned about the fact that the OPP will soon be tearing apart his wife's brand new house. So that's striking to me. But Smythe tells him that by telling the truth, he can minimize the pain. So, soon after, he gets a map and says that he will tell the investigator where Jessica's body is. He admits to the murders and the rapes he committed. And he did all this while he was holding down this job as a commander in Canada's largest Air Force base. That's just incredible.
To me, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, I know you want to compartmentalize things, but still, how can you be a murderer and a commander of an Air Force base?
It's kind of beyond the pale.
It is. I just don't understand how you can do that.
Well, when the first piece of evidence was presented, Williams started to say, I don't understand, and that's when Smythe takes control of him and really repeatedly suggests that the evidence is pointing to him and there's no getting beyond it. I mean, his interview was non-confrontational, he was on his side, and this type of approach really relies on having an officer build a rapport with the suspect, right?
Right, you got to do that.
Yeah. So in Williams' interview, it became clear that his relationship with his wife was very important to him. And this is what Smythe keyed into when he offered him the chance to minimize the impact on his spouse. Now, Smythe found this weakness, and he used it to his advantage.
He certainly did.
Yeah.
So that's why people investigating crimes typically study up on their subject before entering the interrogation room.
You kind of learn who their suspect is.
Right. Look for a way to open up a suspect, get him to start talking. That's the goal.
But some suspects really need to see the evidence before they'll open up, and that seemed to be the case with Russell Williams.
Well, I would.
Well, because you're an intellectual.
But still, they had plenty of evidence against him.
Yeah, but I think with them, they realized they couldn't appeal to his conscience.
No.
Because that wasn't a big thing with him.
He has no conscience.
So he didn't want any more public shaming than necessary. So that's part of the reason. That's a big part of the reason why he made this decision to bail out, avoid a trial, avoid more public embarrassment, avoid this whole process of humiliation that was going to go on. So what about his wife, Mary? Did she notice anything strange? I mean, was he depressed, distant? Did he say or do anything that, looking back, may have offered a glimpse into his other world? Only she knows for sure. I mean, she's never spoken publicly at all ever since. But I wonder how she couldn't have at least seen some kind of glimpse that something was going on. I mean, there are these questions about her that will never go away. As desperate as she was to salvage what was left of her reputation and her future, her husband's heinous double life and her failure to spot it continues to get public attention, and it's a very interesting topic, I believe.
It sure is. I mean, I think people are equally divided as to whether she had knowledge or didn't have knowledge.
Well, no, not to me. I mean, what I've read on the internet is 90% that she's completely innocent.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, these are mostly people that knew her, but those might be the best people to say anything.
They might have been, but I don't see how you can do the stuff that he did and amass the evidence that he did without her having some knowledge.
Yeah, maybe she didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he disappeared a lot.
Yeah.
Although they did have kind of this relationship where they were separate.
Yeah, but he also had tons of lingerie and bras. And
I know, right?
She never knew about those?
Well, I guess it was hidden.
I know they were hidden, but still.
Yeah, it shows a distance in their relationship if she didn't know about it.
Okay, I'll buy that. If their relationship was more of a fraternal relationship,
well, nobody saw them romantic with each other in public.
Right.
So there are these rumors that he hadn't had sex with his wife for years. Now, her divorce application was quite a spectacle, because ballooning over it was a battle about the media's right to see her private financial records. So this would include the post-arrest domestic contract she signed with him. So Russell and Mary had a contract that gave her full ownership of their $700,000 Westboro townhouse. Now, some people believe that, at least half of that should have gone to the victims.
Yeah, why not?
I don't know. Now, her behavior, driven by an admitted concern for her financial security, really has gotten her no sympathy from the public, and myself included. She complained about detectives scratching her hardwood floors, and this is incredible to me. I mean, the Ontario Provincial Police actually gave her a check for $3,000 because she said when they were clearing the evidence out of her house, they scratched her wood floors. What
Yeah.
goes on in a person's mind that you would do that?
I don't know. Please.
It's awful.
It is.
People have died.
You don't come off looking real good.
You don't. Even if you didn't know, a decent person, I feel like, would have some guilt.
Yeah.
You know, that my husband did this. And I could have stopped it, right? Or I could have said something.
Right.
Even if you didn't know, I think you would feel that way. And to actually have the nerve to complain about scratched hardwood floors. And listen, it wasn't even enough for them to sand them and refinish them for her. She insisted that she needed new floors put in.
Yeah. Well, but not the whole floor.
No, a section.
Okay. A section.
Yeah. All right, let's give her
But-
credit there.
But she got money.
I know.
And the whole thing was that they had been extremely careful to not damage the floor or other things.
You know, Dick, I don't give a shit about her floor. Fuck her floor. Women
Well,
died. Women died. I don't
yeah.
give a shit about her floor.
I know.
It's just ridiculous to me.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
And it's not like she's
But they
in
gave her
poverty.
money.
They did. And I don't understand it.
I don't either.
Because you know what? When you look back at Watts riots and things that went on in L.A., people's apartments were torn apart, shredded. Poor people had things destroyed in their homes. They didn't get checks.
No, they didn't.
This is a wealthy woman of a powerful man who victimized women, and they're
she
giving
got
her money
recompensated.
for scratching her fucking floor.
Yeah.
It makes me furious.
No, the chutzpah for that is just off the charts.
Right? Yeah, it just gives me the kind of feeling that she's not a person I would have liked anyway.
Right.
Right.
And that's one of the things that makes you think that she might have been aware of his activities.
Yeah, or at least in some kind of...
Because she's morally corrupt anyway.
Right. At least kind of in denial about it, consciously
Yeah.
denying things.
Right.
Now, she was sued by the first sexual assault victim, which was Lori Massacott?
Massacott.
Yeah.
Was she the first or the second? Jane Doe was the first.
Oh, okay.
Lori was the second.
Okay. Well, she settled
Yeah.
with Mary. So I'm not sure what the others ones are.
She sued the police department.
Are these settled or are these ongoing?
No, they, I think, settled.
Okay.
And Larry Jones has a bunch of suits out.
He does. He was suing everybody. He was not a happy man.
Well, no. His reputation is fucked.
Yeah, but all these people whining, I don't care. People died. People lost family members.
Yeah.
Be happy that you have your family and you're
Well,
safe.
you can say that.
Sure,
but
I can.
You're not the one that's accused. And your whole town thinks of you as a murderer.
But that's over.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but beliefs die hard.
Okay. Well, one question is going to follow Mary Elizabeth Harriman forever, though. How did she not know? I mean, his alter ego was so depraved, it was all-encompassing, and it's really natural, I think, for us to wonder how she could have been blind to it. I mean, he did stash the stolen lingerie in basement boxes and military duffel bags. He stored his crime scene photos, thousands of them, in folders on their shared computer. Now, he told his wife that all those late-night walks helped him stretch out his back. But listen, he was gone for 3 to 7 hours at night. Now, maybe these were on nights when he wasn't with her.
Well, maybe. But even if that's not the case, and she was there some of the time, what are you going to say? Honey, how come you're gone for 7 hours? You're just taking a walk?
Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people would.
Right.
And if she just peeked inside the pillowcase in her garage, it was stuffed with stolen underwear. Hello?
Well,
Maybe she should have been more suspicious, especially after there were these sexual assaults just down the road. There's another thing to look at.
yes.
So it was on October 18th, 2010, when he did plead guilty to all of the charges against him, right?
Yeah, no trial.
No.
Pled out.
Pled. Well, he had the sentencing trial, right?
Right, that's what he had, and people got to talk about what a shitball he is. But,
Yeah.
I mean, he avoided a trial by pleading.
Well, sure. Now, details emerged of other sexual assaults that were committed, which we didn't know about before, including that of a new mother who was wakened with a blow to the head while she and her baby were asleep in her house. So the first day of his trial revealed that he also had he was a bit of a pedophile. He would steal underwear from girls as young as 9 years old, we found out. And he'd made 82 fetish-related home invasions and attempted break-ins, And this was between September 2007 and November 2009, so a little over 2 years.
So he had probably been a busy person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He had progressed from break-ins to sexual assaults to rape and murder. Furthermore, he had kept detailed track of police reports of the crimes he was committing, logging his victims, keeping photos and videos.
So Crown Attorney Robert Morrison presented numerous pictures of Williams, dressed in various pieces of underwear and bras he had stolen. And we know that he frequently masturbated and took videos of that as well on the beds of his victims. Some of the photos presented on the first day of his trial were published in several newspapers. Now, the newspapers explained publishing them, saying, well, yeah, it's troubling, but we also publish them because they really show the essence of the crimes he'd done. And they show the true nature of his crimes. Now, how do you feel about that?
We can go back and forth about that.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I mean, that's basically so people will buy your paper and read it.
Yes, well, that's what their job is.
Right. So it's cynical in that sense.
Sure, but that's their job, and I think we all know that.
Yeah. We're trying to get people to buy our paper and read it.
Which nowadays it's hard to sell a paper.
Yeah, so we'll do it online.
So Ontario Superior Court Justice Robert F. Scott sentenced Williams on October 22, 2010 to 2 concurrent terms of life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. The Canadian forces stripped him of his rank and his medals, and they dismissed him in disgrace, of course. He had a dishonorable discharge. Consequently, also, I found this interesting, his uniform was burned, his medals were cut into pieces, his commission scroll, which I guess is some kind of document confirming his status as a serving officer, that was shredded, and also the Pathfinder, the car, was crushed and scrapped.
People in his neighborhood in Cozy Cove are trying to get the house razed and burned.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how's that going?
They haven't come to a conclusion.
Okay.
But that's what they're trying to do.
Sure, I don't blame them. Now, he currently collects a $60,000 annual military pension. So,
right, and for those who think he shouldn't get it,
sure,
he's legally bound to get it. They can't do anything to not give it to him.
Yeah, maybe that law needs to be changed.
Yeah, that's one of those things. But
or it should be given to the victims.
Yeah, but it's not written that way. So, unfortunately, he's entitled to it.
So in May 2010, he and his wife split their real estate holdings, as I said, and that left him as the sole owner of the cottage in Tweed, and his wife's the sole owner of the Ottawa townhouse. Now, here's something creepy. He refused to pay $8,000 in victim surcharge fines, and they had to take legal action against him through a collection agency to get that paid.
Yeah, isn't that ridiculous?
So, yeah, I mean, besides being a murderer and a creep, I think even if he wasn't a criminal, I wouldn't like this couple. They seem like really greedy, petty people.
I mean,
petty. Well, and you've already been convicted of murder.
Yep.
Crazy. So Williams was initially incarcerated at Kingston in the prison segregation unit. After the prison began the process of closing, he was moved to a maximum security prison, and that's in Port Cartier, Quebec.
And he's there for 25 years. Now, that amazes me a little bit, but I know Canadian justice system is a little different from ours.
It does seem a little more,
but
lenient.
If he had been convicted of these crimes in the U.S., he'd be looking at prison with absolutely no chance of parole.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's true. Well, I hope he doesn't get it.
I'd be amazed if he did.
Yeah, me too. All right, so this is a long podcast. I'm just going to give a quick little self-promotion so we can get to feedback.
Okay.
Okay, so what's going on at Tie Grabber this month? We are working on getting our third part of the O.J. Simpson series out. So we've got that recorded. I just need to edit and put it out, so it should be out within the week. Now you can get access to these and future episodes by going to our website, tiegrabber.com, and joining Team Tie Grabber. Everyone gets a gift. We have a cute and catchy sticker for our $2 members. We have our really cool credit card size bottle opener for our $3 members. And we have our glorious snifter, which is Dick's favorite beer drinking glass, and I drink everything out of it.
What's the only way to go?
Yep.
Seriously.
My favorite thing to drink out of it is probably the Diet Cherry Coke or the chocolate almond milk. They're both really good.
Besides beer.
Besides beer, on top of the beer. and we really appreciate your support. It makes it possible for me to put as much time into the podcast as I do. If you haven't heard about our new podcast, speaking of putting time in, it's called Watching ID, and it is a podcast where we watch a show on the Investigation Discovery Channel, and we talk about it for an hour or so. So right now we're doing a new show called Gone, that there are 6 episodes. First 4 are out, and episode 5 is this week, and that'll be out on Thursday. So every Thursday, pretty much we'll have that out. I don't know if it'll be every single week, but after Gone, we need to think of a different show to do. Now, the most requested one has been American Monster. And I think there are some new episodes coming up in September, so I'm leaning towards that. But if you have ideas on what we should cover, I'd really appreciate you letting us know.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
American Monster? Okay.
It's creepy.
I'm easy.
It's a good creepy show. And also, if you're feeling kind and have a few minutes, we would love to get a review on iTunes from you. Also, if you could subscribe, that would be great. That helps us to get more well-known to new listeners. And follow us on social media. I'll keep you up to date on things. You can follow us on Twitter at TieGrabberPods, on Instagram, also on Facebook. Now, I'm pretty good about letting people know what's coming up. We also have the True Crime Brewery Fan Discussions page, which is a really busy place. We've got some real true crime addicts that post all kinds of new cases on there. Really, it's incredible all the cases that are on there. So we're always happy to get your feedback, and we'll share it during our feedback segments. You can contact us through our website, or you can email us at truecrimebrewery@tiegrabber.com. Let us know what you think of us, what cases you'd like us to cover, and what theories you have on our recently covered cases. Now I'm going to have a little bit of music, and we'll do our feedback segment.
Okay.
Whatever you want, you're so fucking special. I wish I was special, but I'm a creep. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't belong here.
Welcome to Feedback. So I'm going to start out with something from a YouTuber. It's Blondie B4BC, and Blondie says, have you done a podcast on Molly Bish? I live in Warren, Massachusetts, right down the street from Cummings Pond, where she was abducted. This is quite a mystery, and maybe you can shed some light on this crime.
That's a pretty well-publicized crime. She disappeared, and they found her bones years later. They were identified as her.
Oh, okay.
But there's still no real good, viable suspect.
I do enjoy doing the ones that aren't solved, so
yeah,
look into that.
This is unsolved.
So I have a YouTube message from Slantmaster. Oh, and this is about the IHOP murders. In terms of your guys' statement, there must be something wrong with these people. There are a lot of alcoholics, and not all of them are like this. You ought to research Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, known as wet brain. What happens with alcoholics is that their habits eventually rot their brain, literally changing their personality and ability to reason and think rationally, even while sober. If she had been drinking for as long as stated, it's very likely she had progressed to the later stages of this syndrome. She would not have been a sane person anymore, drunk or sober. This was very insightful.
Well, yeah, but still, whether she had Wernicke-Korsakoff or not, she still didn't think things out. And
but he's saying maybe her brain didn't work.
Well, all right, I put it the wrong way.
Yeah.
She still functioned as a person who could wait on tables and do everything.
Right.
else.
Most people with that can't do that. Well, explain a little bit then. Is this like a dementia? Does it make it hard to function?
It's a dementia.
Okay.
So I would have thought that there'd be other things that would make you think there's something going on with this lady.
Well, yeah, plus she was able to do these complicated financial things, remember?
Right.
She was able to go and forge these sales of properties and
Yeah,
things.
so I don't think her brain had been turned to mush. Yeah, it was.
I'm not sure, but I think it was a good thing to think about.
No, I would agree with that.
Okay, so I have an email from Sam regarding the beauty school murder of Mackenzie Powell. which was last week's episode.
Right.
Hi, Jill and Dick. I'm an employee of the Wenatchee Courthouse and a law student. I would like to share my concerns on Chris Wilson's conviction. Joey Fisher was one of the first investigated suspects in the death of Mackenzie Cowell. By February 9, 2010, he was living with Mackenzie Cowell's mother, Wendy Cowell, for 2 years, having established a romantic relationship. Through this relationship connection, he had a connection to Mackenzie Cowell. Along with his natural connection to Mackenzie Cowell, Joey Fisher was also thought to be having a romantic relationship with Mackenzie, and this is substantiated through evidence. During the course of the investigation, detectives examined Mackenzie's room and discovered letters and personal notes showing a romantic relationship between Mackenzie and Mr. Fisher. Most significantly, there was a note that stated, "I heart Joey," written on April 22, 2010. This was significant to the degree that Detective Cruz spoke to the task force about how important this note is, as it is evidence of a possible romantic relationship. Joey Fisher strongly possessed motive to murder Mackenzie Cowell, as she could threaten any relationship between him and Wendy. Wendy had made accusations of cheating, and Joey disliked Mackenzie due to the time she took away from him and Wendy. Now, Mackenzie lived 30% of the time with her mother and 70% of the time with her father, Reed. Mr. Fisher also had the means to kidnap and murder Mackenzie Cowell. Mr. Fisher is known as a person who can snap very easily, according to his co-worker, Christopher Winter. And compounding this is the insight into Mr. Fisher's character, because Mr. Winter said that Joey Fisher said to him, "I could kill somebody and get away with it." Mr. Winter also admitted to working in Crescent Bar one time with Mr. Fisher, and this is where Mackenzie Cowell's body was found. This demonstrates familiarity with an area. Mr. Winter was presented as a person who willingly presented details about Joey Fisher that cannot be disproven, and he was not evasive in his statements. Mr. Fisher's alibi on February 9th was that he was jogging at the time in snow and unfavorable conditions. So opposing this highly probable alibi is both Wendy and Joey Fisher's worker, Mr. Winter, who both stated that it's highly unusual for Joey to jog, as it was an act of which he never engaged in before. So with no provable alibi, Mr. Fisher is a viable suspect whose involvement in the crime is not far-fetched and is substantiated through supporting evidence. This was evidence that law enforcement failed to test. This was evidence that could have potentially held value and questions the motives of law enforcement. This includes a classic Linens brand hand towel which exhibited a dark red spot, as well as red and white specks that reminded Chief Wag, the presiding officer, of the residue left on a towel after you clean a meat saw. This evidence wasn't tested. Additionally, a hammer was found with this towel and was never collected by law enforcement. This is something that had evidentiary value. It was found in a police search of a dumpster. On February 9th, Joey Fisher had an improbable and unprovable alibi. There is also further evidence which questions the exact whereabouts and activities of Joey Fisher. He did not have any call or text history stored on his cell phone between 7 p.m. on February 9th to 7:30 a.m. on February 10th. Based on a review of Mr. Fisher's typical text and call history, this suggests that Fisher deleted calls and text messages during these hours for no justifiable reason. Law enforcement should have persistently pursued Joey Fisher and failed to test evidence which could strengthen or weaken the case against Joey Fisher, and the lack of equal treatment under the law is essentially what denied Chris Wilson a fair trial. Evidence pertaining to other suspects wasn't tested for an unknown reason, and even if any such reason exists, it does not justify the non-testing of evidence. So this was an interesting letter from Sam. Like I said, I haven't validated any of it.
Well, yeah, but if this is all true, that would paint a whole different picture. I mean, if Mackenzie had a relationship with her mother's boyfriend and was going to talk to her mom about it, I could see the motive.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. But I hate to go there without knowing if it's real.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Because then we're putting a negative spin on these people.
But this person sounds like she knows what's going on.
I mean, we can look into it further, and if anyone else knows anything about this, I'd love to hear about it.
Because that would put a whole different spin on things.
It's a whole different spin from what we got in our research.
Yep.
Yep. And a whole different spin from the 48 Hours episode. All right, Dick. Well, that's all we have for feedback.
It was fun.
We'll see you at the Quiet Ed. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.